Okay, so this is the introductory video to this channel. I just kind of wanted to make it a tight series, just focusing on what I feel I can offer to the conversation about personality disorders. I am very concerned about the issue because I have struggled with a personality disorder. I'm not proud of it. It's something that's been actually something that I really wish I didn't have to deal with, and that's been a lot of trouble, caused a lot of trouble in my life and with my family and my social life. But I do think it's important. It's a very important conversation that we need to have, and I am very concerned about the approach that's really dominated by psychology itself. And I do think there's a lot of problems with letting psychology itself kind of dominate the discourse on personality disorders because they may pretend to be the final experts on the human mind, but we forget that there's also there's also novelists, there's also philosophers, there's also just normal people. And if you look at the university, the psychology department is really a very specific subculture. It really doesn't represent, all of what are really us people. So I think we have to be really careful to avoid letting one very small fraction of the some small demographic kind of dominate, something as broad as the human mind. I mean, the human mind is, I think it deserves to be defined by more than just one subculture, with its own traditions and its own political leanings and biases. So I think that's very important. It's something that I really want to try to push, in terms of the questions that I ask about it. And so this, I tried to produce a first video, but it had major audio issues. So this is my second try, but I wanted to kind of produce a series of videos, sort of going through, my approach to questioning the topic of personality disorders, and specifically the narcissistic personality disorder, which is something that I unfortunately have been diagnosed with. Anyway, so basically the whole purpose of this channel is just to maybe kind of put aside maybe the traditional way of looking at the personality disorder, and also to question, you know, um, to ask serious questions about maybe some of the biases in psychology itself, and to really, to really take a cold look at how the kind of people that would end up in psychology and the kind of subculture that is psychology may actually have serious biases that could kind of feed into the public bias that maybe is not the best we could do as far as looking at personality disorders. So the main thing that I see with the psychology's conception of personality disorders is this is the one area of psychology where I really feel like you can see almost kind of a religious framework in psychology, where it's just kind of like it's like axiomatic that the personality is sort of like the ground level of who you are, and that looking below that is really kind of almost outside of psychology. Psychology is likely to talk a little bit about temperament and neurological issues, but really, unless you have something like dementia, or you have something like maybe some autism, or maybe something like Alzheimer's, basically, or maybe they even have their own theories about what causes depression and bipolar. But it's interesting how really not correct the psychiatry has been about what really causes those disorders. So anyway, but as far as like the personality disorders, it really seems like there's very little that I see, going into what might temperamentally and functionally, physically result in what we know as the personality disorder. So in the end, what the public gets is really what they don't need, which is that at the very bottom of the personality disorder is just a set of very, very unlikable and unsympathetic characteristics. These are the personality traits. He's selfish, he's arrogant, and there's nothing you can do about it, and these are just kind of fixed, unfortunate traits, and it's just kind of like that's the disorder. It's sort of the symptoms are the root of it, and I think that's very unfortunate because I do think there are a certain combination of temperamental characteristics that actually lead to these disorders. Not to say the personality is really something easily changeable, and probably, honestly, probably if we can change the personality, probably only in a very limited way. So, unfortunately, I think the temperamental characteristics we have are really for life, but maybe the way they combine and the way they kind of interact with each other, now that might be a little bit, we might be able to untangle some of that. So I think we should be really careful about just describing the personality as the ground level, the root of who we are. I do think that the personality is actually a an entanglement of different factors that can be a little bit untangled. You're still going to have the basic temperamental characteristics, but I do think it's possible to sort of untangle them and sort of unfuse them, so that there is the possibility of some development. Um, so, in my opinion, my fundamental disagreement with psychology and their approach is that psychology tends to look at personality characteristics as kind of like the ground level root of your being, and there's kind of not too much goes into the temperamental aspect. I think more focus should be on that, and also eventually, maybe physical factors in the brain that could really explain why a person would end up falling into these very unfortunate conditions. The other thing, questioning the psychological approach, and also identifying psychology, as really a subculture, and it's, it has its own biases. But then also maybe inviting people to explore maybe a more philosophical approach, because I'll be the first to admit that, personality disorders are very real. There's no need to deny that they exist. And frankly, they could be dangerous, just like schizophrenia can be very dangerous, depression can be very dangerous. I think there's been a lot of studies that indicate that a lot of domestic violence arises out of depression. That's one of the big risk factors, suicide. So, you know, the bottom line is that there are a lot of conditions that can lead to to real danger. And I think personality disorders are among them, and they deserve to be taken seriously. So, I take it seriously, but I do question how we think about it, and I do think that having a more philosophical approach to personality disorders might I think there's a certain magic to being maybe more philosophical about things, looking at things more from a point of view of understanding. That doesn't mean that you're going to solve the problem of personality disorder, but maybe if we have maybe a more enlightened understanding of them, we can sort of, as people in general, sort of navigate them without having to have like an attitude about it. I think really we should all be honest, that whenever we're to the point of having an attitude about anything, we know we're not in the most mature place that we could be. We should really be beyond our attitudes, and not we shouldn't process the world through a position of our attitudes. I think that's something that's just too common nowadays, and I'm guilty of it too, because we all have attitudes. But I think we should strive to really be beyond our attitudes and really operate more from understanding. I think it's just we know that's the better way, and we see that with, for example, take the personality disorders out of it. Look at, like, say, wild animals. If you're living in a neighborhood where some wild bears are coming out of the mountains, I think most of the time our reaction is not, oh, I hate bears. Bears are so evil. They're terrible. Maybe some people feel that way, but I think most people are just like, well, yeah, wild animals are dangerous, And I think we look at it that way, and we look at how we're going to deal with it. So I think we can take that attitude, the attitudes we have about personality disorders. Oh, he's so selfish. He's so arrogant. And maybe the better way to look at it is, well, this person has some really unsympathetic characteristics, because just like a person with a person with dementia might have some very unlikable, very unpleasant and off-putting characteristics. We understand it's because of the dementia, or let's say somebody's a drug addict. Oh, it's because he's on drugs. Well, just understanding that the things that make the NPD, the narcissist, or any other personality disorder, makes them, let's say, maybe paranoid or disagreeable, that there is a reason for it, and it's really probably an unfortunate condition, unfortunate physical condition that can explain that. Not to say that it can be dealt with easily, and maybe maybe some people should be even more careful about not making friends too easily, or choosing their friends better, or learning how to limit contact and avoid certain people. Perfectly reasonable, but that doesn't mean we have to hate them or we have to have an attitude, because frankly, then we can have an attitude about anything. Why couldn't we have an attitude about people being impatient driving their cars? In the United States, I think we've gotten to the point where, if I understand, I might have to recheck this, but I think it's like more than 40,000 fatalities per year on the roadways in the United States. And why couldn't we just be up in arms and just hating on everybody who's an impatient driver? It's just, we don't do that because in most of our lives we live beyond attitude. It's just not a mature way to approach things. And at the same time, we have to be fully aware that there are things in this world that are dangerous. And a personality disorder is one example of a kind of a derangement, sort of a poor organization of the mind, where you're not really operating in reality, and you're not interacting in reality. It's a distortion. Take away how much we don't like somebody being arrogant or being looking down on people or whatever. But what's really going on is that person is distorted. And so that doesn't mean it's safe to be around them. So my attitude here is, my position here is that we should really be striving for understanding. I think that's very helpful. I personally am very skeptical at the idea of, let's be more empathetic. I think empathy to me is one of these buzzwords that may be one of the least helpful, and maybe very overrated. First of all, I don't think it's well understood. I don't think it's well defined. And I think a lot of people who claim to be empathic, who knows what they mean, and who knows what they really are, what really is going on. I think anytime we fall into buzzwords, we probably don't even know what we're talking about. That's probably what's going on. Whereas something simple like trying to understand people, that is something we can define, and that does make sense, and it is easy to understand what that means. And I do think that when we try to understand people better, we may end up actually doing a better job of protecting ourselves from those people. But at the same time, we might lose the attitudes and kind of clean up the airspace, so that our airspace isn't so full of attitude, and maybe just less attitude and more understanding, is probably just more mature for everybody, And anyway, so in these videos, I'll be talking about what I think is really going on with personality disorders. It's just a point of view, Point of view is for free, and maybe my point of view is maybe not valid in a lot of ways, but maybe there's even just a little piece of something useful in a different point of view that's worth putting out there. And in the end, hopefully with these videos, I probably will just do 6 or 7 videos about NPD and personality disorders. But the idea is that maybe we'll rethink, how we want to approach these things, and other things that are similar, other disorders out there, just so that we can operate more from a position of understanding, and how that might kind of clean up our airspace, so to speak. So anyway, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll try to produce a couple of videos just kind of really addressing what may really be going on with, in my case, the narcissistic personality disorder, or any other personality disorder, because I do think it's really worth questioning and looking at, maybe not always from the traditional point of view. So yeah, appreciate it, and thanks for watching.